everybody, and welcome to another episode of Horror Movie Night. This week, we are talking about Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, or, as it's sometimes listed, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2.
Yeah. Get it right.
Get it right. Get it tight.
Oh my God, guys.
All right, so Kyle, I'm pretty sure this one is your pick.
Yes.
So let's talk. Well, actually, before you even explain why you picked it, am I the only one that this was my first viewing?
Yes. Dude, I've seen this movie like 5 times now, and I don't know why. We'll get there.
So I was late to, well, when the Blair Witch stuff first happened, I was like the key demographic.
This is definitely the time for us all to talk about our experiences with the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
Because we're never going to talk the original movie, guys. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, we shouldn't.
But like, I was that key demographic where that trailer and website and everything dropped, and like my aunts and uncles were like, "Oh my God, you've got to see this. I think it might be real." I don't like. They were like buying it hook, line, and sinker, and I was getting like really excited. And then I didn't see it in theaters, but I eventually watched it at a friend's house in the basement in the middle of the afternoon, and I was like, this movie fucking sucks. Like, I was like so not interested in it. So when they announced that there was a sequel, I was like, hard pass. Like, could not be less interested in this movie. But, you know, I've come around to the original Blair Witch for what it is. I love watching it with the crazy fan theories that have been put out there, that it's like it's all a gaslighting scheme to like lure, like Scott, do you know what I'm talking about? I know I've pitched this to Kyle.
Is Heather the name? Yes.
Heather's being gaslit by the other guys so that they can murder her in the woods. And it's interesting to watch it because that does actually make sense with the beats of the movie, if that's what's actually going on. So fan theories have made the movie more fun, but ultimately, yeah, like we're never going to do a Blair Witch episode. So I put off watching this. I had seen the 2016 Blair Witch movie,
which I
before
have not
I saw
seen.
this one.
No, I've not seen that one either. That's Wingard. Is Adam Wingard? I think.
Yeah, that's Adam Wingard. The only thing that made me want to see that was because when I was at San Diego Comic-Con 2016, there were all these people handing out posters for a special screening of a new horror movie called The Woods. And a bunch of people from Geekscape went to check it out. I was like, dude, I got to go to bed. But they all came back and like, dude, it was a secret Blair Witch movie. And like they said nothing about it being a Blair Witch movie. So everyone's just watching what they thought was like a crazy movie in the woods, and then midway through realized that it's a Blair Witch sequel. I think changing the name from The Woods to Blair Witch for like the mainstream release was a huge fuck up, because it seems like that twist was like part of the appeal of watching
I feel
the
like
movie.
that would have been I would have watched it. I
They should have just done The Woods, Blair Witch 3.
Yeah, obviously.
Exactly.
It's very clear.
And then when it goes
successful.
direct to video, you do Blair Witch 3, The Woods, because you know?
100%.
So
Scott, how about you tell us your experience with Blair Witch, and then Kyle can tell us his experience with Blair Witch into why he picked this.
All right. So Blair Witch, I knew about the ad campaign. What year was that? Was that 98?
I want to say it was like 96, 97, 98. Like, it was a slow roll build.
But yes, so I think that there was enough saturation, because I lived in a small town, so I think there was enough saturation of that story, of the concept, the cultivation of the online presence of Blair Witch, that by the time it reached my small town cinema, which I went to the next town over, it doesn't matter, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is bullshit. But I could still will myself at like 16 years old to suspend my disbelief and go in and be like, this is as close as I'm going to get to like the best found footage that I'm going to find. You know, like this found footage. Also, Blair Witch really set off the found footage concept, in my opinion. I know that there were other things that did it first, but I think that Blair Witch was the first commercial success of it, and I think a lot of it had to do with the infancy of the internet, and we don't really talk about the show. The show doesn't work that way, where we go into deep dives about like the technical aspect of why something works or doesn't in like the zeitgeist.
But the internet was the biggest marketing agent for that movie working.
Also, what made that watch great for me was we drove out to the next town over to see it, and to get to that theater in the next town over, there was a shortcut where we would go down back roads from. So I drove to my buddy's house, Eric. Matt, you've met Eric before.
Yeah,
we came to one of our previous live stream events here in Akron. So Eric and I drove to Eric's house. Eric drove us down back roads and then across a sod farm. Now, listeners, if you don't know how sod farms work, they plant grass seed, which has relatively strong roots, and then they have machinery that basically turns it into a carpet, and they roll that carpet up. It's probably about, 7 feet wide, and then it is long, like it's super long, but they make these like fruit roll-ups made of grass, right? And
that's exactly
as you
what they
do
are,
that
yes.
for 50 years, you slowly erode the ground underneath, because as you're cutting up the sod, you're taking about a half an inch or an inch of ground with you every time, and no matter how much you put back down, you're always going to take more. So we're driving along this road that goes straight through a sod farm. It's a back road. I mean, it's like the sod farm is on either side, and didn't think much of it because it's about like 8 o'clock. I think we saw like the 8:30 showing. We get out at 10, right? It's October, and we're driving back along the sod farm, and because of the fact that the sod farm has lower lying areas on both sides of the road, they're at least 5 feet lower on both sides. There's a fog that's sitting so thick you can't see through it on both sides of the road, and then it's thin enough so that you can drive through it as you're driving along this, but it feels like you're driving on a moor, basically. And I remember that was what did it for me. It was the aftershock of going to see Blair Witch and then driving through this incredibly spooky physical, like this atmosphere. And I had an original Blair Witch poster in my room until I went to college, because I worked at a video store, and I got one for free. And they had promotional enamel pins of the Blair Witch sign, like that little
the sticks,
that little stick thing,
twigs.
And I had that twig thing. That enamel pin followed me from high school on my backpack to college on my messenger bag, all the way to when I started my first job. I still had it, and then one of the arms cracked off of it, but it lasted me, what is that, 10 years?
That's dope. That's a good run.
That's a good ass run. Kyle, what's your Blair Witch origins before we get into your pick for this?
I don't have one besides.
Did you see this first?
I wouldn't put it past him.
I will. I'll jump the gun a little bit. I do own this and not the original Blair Witch. And this one is a dual layer.
This is way more of a Kyle movie, though. This one, so much so more than the first.
Bro, like, I'm really falling into the caricature that I built for myself more than I expected to. But and it's a dual-sided DVD and CD. So I have this. I think I have the soundtrack on the other side.
Pump the brakes, sir. We will be talking about this soundtrack soon enough.
You're goddamn right. We will. So I know we'll get into that.
Soundtrack City.
Soundtrack City for sure.
This was like if they hired Matt Kelly to make a movie soundtrack.
Without.
And I was like, well, can Marilyn Manson cover the MASH theme?
Yeah.
What's POD and Project 86 up to? Do you think they can give us
We can
some
get
songs?
them, right? That's your evangelism is putting POD on the soundtrack. That's what I would imagine.
Yeah, 100%.
Obviously, I was scared to see Blair Witch when it came out because I was
young.
8, 9, but I was also super interested in Snopes.com. So like I was all over Snopes trying to like everything that was Disney or oddball stuff. Like I was an early conspiracy theorist, but also like Snopes was like my way of figuring it all out. I was like, you're a resource, I guess.
Dude.
You're reliable, I guess.
Can we talk about real quick Snopes.com and its ability to, there was like most of it was like movie facts or whatever, but there was the one page that was about like deaths.
Yes.
And it was like, has someone died at Disney World or whatever? Like, and I remember the one that freaked me out was there ever a real corpse found inside of a haunted attraction? And I saw that green fucking dot saying that it was, and I was like, no, Scott, it's way worse than that. It was that there was like a corpse that was like on tour. Like they were touring this corpse around the United States in like the 30s.
What the fuck?
And somehow,
this story's fucking great.
Yeah, and somehow over time, people were like, well, that's not a real body. So they sold it to like just some like Jim and Irma's haunted attraction site in the middle of fucking nowhere. So they just took the body out, thinking it was a prop, and had it like hanging from like a noose in their haunted, like their dark ride haunted attraction.
Okay.
And then at one point, over age, the arm fell off, and they saw that there was an actual bone inside of it, and realized that they had hung a real life corpse in their haunted attraction.
It's
unknowingly.
fucking it's amazing.
Oh,
And
man,
it did
that's
freak me out
amazing.
too. That one was
Yeah.
spooky. But I just loved the red, the stoplight key, basically, to tell me
Yeah.
whether I was like, I just needed to click like it was my way of reading headlines.
It's like pre-Wikipedia.
Yeah, basically. I didn't see Blair Witch in its entirety until I was like 25, maybe, and my buddy Hunter gave me a VHS tape, which is the only way to watch it. Like, it was like
Oh,
the
yeah.
regular release of it, and it was fine. It was like one of those things at that point in time, I was like, oh, it's historical for me to watch it now. You know what I mean? I was
think
like,
it still is. That's not. People don't watch the original Blair Witch for true
funsies.
entertainment value. They
No.
watch it because of what it was.
because I had seen all the I had seen all the parodies, and I had
Yeah.
seen all the fucking like Blair Thumb or whatever the fuck. Like,
I have
you
Blair
know.
Thumb.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't-
Oh
Yeah.
man, that is an
Yeah.
uncovered memory. You are
Yeah.
executing
Yeah.
my brain right now.
No,
man.
the worst one
Yeah.
that my brother and I rented, because we definitely dove deep into. I think that the
There's
Blair
a lot
Witch,
of parodies of this.
I was gonna say Blair
than
Witch
anything.
Project really blew the roof on how many parodies can you do of a single entity.
Yeah.
But the one that we watched was the Bogus Witch Project, starring
That's-
Pauly
Oh.
Shore.
Yep, I've seen the
And
cover, not the movie.
It is fucking unwatchable. It is one of the least. Somehow, Pauly Shore has the funniest bit in the entire movie, which says a lot about how bad it is, and not so much about Pauly Shore. But all of them are just like these 3 to 4 minute Blair Witch parodies compiled into an hour and a half long anthology.
Yeah, that
But the
sounds
Pauly Shore one is just him watching the movie in theaters and commentating over it for 5 minutes, and that's the peak of the comedy in the movie.
You know, do you guys remember?
Pauly Shore riff tracks ain't dope, dude. I'm
No,
not
man,
about
no.
that life.
I'm not for that. I can't go for that, as the great Hall & Oates once sang. But do you guys remember? This is a rhetorical question because I do know the answer to this. Do you remember the porn parody of the Blair Witch Project?
Yeah.
The
No.
Blair Bitch Project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any good?
No, it's
No,
awful.
masterpiece.
Don't listen to Matt. First of all, Matt
I'm
covers his
kidding.
eyes.
I'm kidding.
I want
Right.
I want listeners who missed the live stream to realize that Matt is such a gentleman to a fault that he covers his eyes when he does edits for the porn stars that he podcasts with and for. He's like, oh no, I can't see boobies. So the fact that Matt's like, oh yeah, Blair Bitch Project is a work of modern cinematic magic.
Total masterpiece.
Master something.
Master something for sure. Fuck, Scott.
Master, I don't even know her.
Yeah, that's right. That's fucking right.
But so here's the thing about Blair Witch 2. The fact that I've seen it so many times has everything to do with the fact that I was definitely working at the video store still when this was a promo. I definitely saw this before it actually came out, because they would send you the promo copies that you would give to the store so that they could hype up your movie, right? And I was like, I don't know how they can go up from the Blair Witch Project, but I'll watch it anyway. And it comes in with the sweet sounds of Marilyn Manson, and I was like, this is not going to be good. And it wasn't. This movie is absolutely stupid. And the thing about it is that it has to be cursed, because I've watched it 5 times, I'd say. Maybe 5.5, right? I've watched it a lot, more than anyone ever should. Every time I watch it, I like it more. It's
Yeah,
cursed.
no, I was gonna say
motherfucker.
this was my first watch, and I was like, this- But see, here's the thing. So I was reading a lot of the breakdowns of the reviews, and this is a movie that got absolutely destroyed.
Oh, yeah, it did.
At
I
its original
remember.
release. People were like, "Fuck this movie, fuck everything about it." But it's kind of having one of those like Halloween 3 situations where people hear me, but people are looking back at it and they're like, "Yes." As a direct sequel to the Blair Witch Project, yes, you were correct in your initial thoughts of what
Yes.
the fuck is this. But from the perspective of just a descent into madness with a small cast indie film, It's not the worst. There's better, but it's not terrible.
It's dumb, but it's not a bad way to spend your time. And I think
No,
that
it
it's
moves.
charming in a rose-tinted glasses sort of way. Nostalgia covers a lot of hurt. But the thing
But
that
I haven't
gotta-
watched it until today, so I can't say it's all nostalgia. But I will say that this felt already like I was doing a double feature with next week's movie. There's a lot of...
Oh,
Yeah.
Do you know
There's a
why I
lot
picked
of
next week's movie,
overlap.
Matt? Because this is why I picked next week's movie. Because I saw what what Kyle picked. So listen, this is the most glowing review you're ever gonna hear about Blair Witch 2. So strap in, boys.
Yep, I'm ready.
And I do mean this with love. There are a lot of bad sequels out there. There are bad sequels in two ways. There are bad sequels that are bad because they ruin the first one. And there are bad sequels because they are just bad movies. They're unwatchable, right? Now, this is a perfect sequel. I don't mean this is a good movie by any means, but I think that it takes what Blair Witch did and it runs with it, and it's a really good sequel.
It runs the right path.
Exactly.
It runs
It's the right
like
path.
totally
not a
runs
good
the right
movie,
path.
But
but it does what
conceptually
it's
is right.
Yes.
But do you
Agreed.
think... I was thinking about this about halfway through this movie, right? Do you think that this was a different script before Blair Witch happened, and then
No.
they kind of rewrote the first 15 minutes because the rest of it isn't even in the woods. You know what I mean? Like it's just like a descent into madness in a warehouse for an hour of the movie.
I understand what you're getting at, and I did a little bit of research, and what I got from it is that the writer-director hated the final cut because the studio had a ton of interference, and I think that what you may not have noticed because you've watched it once, that's not a diss. You're lucky.
That is true. You are an expert with your 5
I
viewings.
don't want this knowledge and skill.
You should, Scott. We needed to submit this to Guinness because you might be
You might
the
be.
person who's watched this more than any other human
Yeah.
being
Except
on the
for
planet.
the editor.
Yeah, right,
So-
right. And
so-
and then the third one is the dude who just really loved that redhead witch spinning around naked, which I
Yeah.
know it could have
There's
been me.
some-
In an alternate universe was me. I missed the boat.
Oh man, you're too
Anyway.
young.
That's why I
No,
watched it
but
twice today.
but
No.
it does feel like it does tonally sometimes feel like there's two directors, which must be, which I didn't realize until you were throwing this fact at
The
us
interference,
that
yeah.
just like is one's the studio and one's the director, because there are moments where the comedy of it is way heavy, and then the last scene of the movie is this emotionally driven Halloween 3-esque
I really love the end of
network
this movie.
It's
so much better than the rest of the movie, and I think that that's what makes me like it more each time I watch it. Is that it really the clothing, the
Yes.
just the hair, the cuts, the coloration, everything, and it just really reminds me of high school, and I
Yeah.
know that that's not a reason to love a movie, and I don't love this movie. Let me be entirely clear here, but I think that my enjoyment of it has a lot to do with the fact that I was in a very entertained place in my life,
Yes.
satisfied place in my
Yeah.
life when it came out, and so this reminds me of that time. But also, I think that it really builds towards, and if you know that when you're watching it, and you kind of can see where they're telegraphing the conceit of the movie, the twist of the movie, I think that it works really well. I think that it's a really well written movie. And Matt, I would just want to push back in a very gentle way when you say that you think that this was shoehorned into a Blair Witch movie because so much of it isn't in the woods. I think that the reason why that is because they couldn't go back to the woods for the entire movie, because I personally wouldn't want to retread. That would have been that retread would have sucked. What they did was they took the idea of secret video footage, and then they made the people watch it who did it, and then they had them not see the real footage until the last 3 minutes. And I think that that's genius in its own right, and that's what I mean. I think it's a really good sequel because it takes the mechanics of the first movie, and it's we can do that again without making it boring. And I think
You know
that
what you
that's
could have
just
done
genius.
though? Here's something that, and I've pitched this before with 3 from Hell as well, but I think my favorite parts of this movie are the first 5 minutes where it's almost like a mini documentary about
So
it's
good,
so
too.
good, yeah.
you know what I mean? And like you said, watching the footage. there's a way that you do this movie where it never stops being a doc. You know what I mean? Like, it is a doc about...
that would not have happened, though.
It would not have worked, but I think in 2022, that shit would have been amazing. You know what I mean? Because it's like a doc where you're, like, covering the fandom, and then it's, like, the story of this other murder that happened with a bunch of Blair Witch fans, and, like, you're building to the revealing of the footage that they find. You know what I mean? Like,
I think in 2022, it would actually just end up being the last broadcast. It would somehow work its way right back around.
Get Chris LaMartino on the phone, because I think between him and Kyle, we could make a fucking great movie.
I just want to I want to interrupt real quick because
what's that sound? What's that sound?
It's our
Where's
first,
the map?
so I had to get an Oktoberfest. But this one is also called Bare Branches, which the Blair Witch symbol that gets so lovingly sold is made of bare branches. So cheers to Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2.
And I have one too. Matt's got a Liquid Death, which is not wrong because they need some hydration after their big night out first night.
Yeah.
How are they even functioning the next day?
Yeah, Blair Witch's Big Night Out is what this movie's other title could have been.
Blair Witch Hangover. I have one too. I have Southern Tier Warlock, which is my favorite pumpkin beer. The only pumpkin beer I seek out in October because it tastes like cinnamon, and I love cinnamon. So I'm not going to drink it, but I had it in the fridge, and I was just like, I got to share it. So listeners, if you like pumpkin beers, this is an Imperial Pumpkin Stout. So drink one, or else you will be shit-faced, or an alcoholic if you don't feel it. But that's conversation for you and the Lord.
For you.
Yeah. So anyway,
we have not even touched a single note that I wrote, which is
we can touch whatever you want, Matt.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're all edging over here, baby. Join us.
But I do want to point out. Let me ask you guys this question. So the first Blair Witch movie infamously was like kind of made without a script, but more of like a rough guideline that only the directors really knew, and they were kind of fucking with the actors. While I do think that this movie had way more of a structured out plot, it just couldn't. You couldn't just like riff out what this movie is with its twists and the turns. Because all of the actors have the exact same names as their characters, or the characters have the same names as the actors, and a lot of the performances here, I'm curious if very little dialogue was written for this movie, except for like
it wouldn't be a Blair Witch
lines.
sequel if it wasn't.
Because
basically scriptless, all right?
The biggest thing that hinders this movie on my enjoyment level is that there is not a good performance to be found in this movie.
And that's the thing is that we've seen this so many times on Horror Movie Night, and this spans back to the Reddit Horror Club days and my childhood and probably decades of horror cinema. These people can't fucking act, but they have chutzpah, and that's all that the director cared about. So everybody's awful. I don't give a fuck about anybody's well-being in this film. I've watched it enough times that you'd think that I would have a little bit of care. I don't. And the way that they present their lines isn't shocking dark level bad, but it's just like hilariously stupid. They talk about like, are you casting some sort of evil spell? And she's like, no, I'm a Wiccan. And like, it just takes me back to when every alt girl was Wicca. Like she was like, oh, I'm a witch, I'm Wiccan. And it was between this and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series, that, you know what, there's no harm in it. There was no harm in it. I feel like it's so innocently wonderful that Oh, and remember that episode of fucking Pen 15 when they were deciding that they were going to be witches?
They were going to be witches, yeah.
That's why that episode worked so damn well, is because this
movie specifically, and this is a sentence that good Christian boy Matt Kelly never imagined he would be recording on any podcast. But this movie feels almost offensive to Wiccans. Like the fact that she gets upsetting news and she runs to a circle, lights some candles, and starts praying seems to go against everything I understand.
Dude, so I unfortunately connected so much to that particular portion when she explained Wicca to us. Yeah. I don't know. I must have talked about this on the podcast. So please tell me if I have. But I connected so deeply because that is almost It feels word for word how I explained to my high school that I was a Satanist to an assembly of people. Have I ever told this story?
No. Oh my God. Go off, Queen.
Okay. So you're absolutely right. Like it is robotic and like, but she's so endearing and trying to really get this point across that it's not, witches are not what everybody thinks them to be, right? Like that's, Wicca is no, there's no cursed spell or whatever. Like, so we have this a freshman year, high school. We have this assembly.
Oh my God.
About like bullying and diversity. So the sophomores are taking like the SATs or whatever they're doing. It's like some standardized test. The freshmen have taken the practice standardized test, but they don't do it the whole week. So we split up the practice tests with the assemblies. This assembly is about bullying, diversity, acceptance, prejudice, everything, right? It's the assembly for going into high school. And then at the end of the presentation, they open up 2 mics to have people come up and talk about their experiences of being diverse, maybe potentially having been bullied, so on and so forth. And it was a great tool at the time for people to get off of their chests the things that they were self-conscious about. One person in particular was like, she had matured faster than most of the other women in the school. So she was like, just because like I have big boobs doesn't make me a slut. Like that's not like she just, like things like that were happening. And a black kid came up and was talking about being like predominantly like being black in a predominantly white school and the generic shit.
And then Kyle shows himself
and
on
then
the stage.
The chutzpah that you've talked about coming from Erica, the fire was lit inside of me to then go up and tell everybody that, yes, in fact, I am a Satanist, but it's not what you all think.
The rumors
and
are
that
true.
was my opening. That was my opening fucking line. And I followed a Catholic kid who would later become my best friend in high school, which is very funny. But a kid who went up and was like, I'm Catholic and people make fun of me because like I went, I go to church every week and all this stuff. And it's like being a Christian or being Catholic is not like, doesn't make me lesser than or whatever. So I go up and I actually think I said, that's a tough one to follow. And knowing me, I wasn't talking directly into the mic. I was probably mumbling this far, further back. Yeah. And so trying to lighten the mood. I go, that's a tough one to follow, but I say something along the lines of, everybody thinks I'm a Satanist just because I dress in black and listen to bands like Marilyn Manson, and I am, but it's not as bad as everybody thinks. And I start to stumble. I start to realize that nobody's with me in this. Nobody is happy. Everybody had been clapping for each person had come up and talked. And my spattering of applause was not even a spattering. It was like a couple people who might not have been listening. Yeah, like it was very that. It was very that. And so I start going off the rails a little bit, being like, I'm not sacrificing animals. It's all about, and, I had just read maybe the first chapter of the Satanic Bible, if that. Dude, like I was not in it to win it, truly. But I was like, it's not Christianity.
That you were bi because you didn't.
Right. I didn't know how to connect with people.
Yeah, you're like,
somehow being
a
Satanist was going to be.
Sides.
Yeah, dude, it was a true attention-seeking moment.
But the crazy irony of you being a Satanist in high school and Christian now, and me being a Christian in high school and non-religious now is just,
and we're just like this, Scott.
We're
just
two penises in a pod.
and it was so I didn't have friends for about 2 years in my class.
And that's definitely because you said you were a Satanist, right?
Definitely because I said I was a Satanist. But the sophomore, junior, senior classes were not there, so they did not know. They heard through the grapevine about me saying that if there was any talk of me at all,
and they're like, we got to party with this guy.
So how much D&D did you play with the Hellfire Club? Because I assume that's
bro, I was not committed to any of it. I was so uncommitted to being bisexual and being a Satanist.
I'm pretty sure you've never you've touched one set of genitalia in your life.
Yeah, 2 in my own.
I guess that does make you bi.
Right, yeah. I was really into my own dick. I was so uncommitted, dude. So I dropped the Satanist thing pretty soon before I went to sophomore year. Like, I still have my Satanic Bible up in my room or in our library. But I felt very connected to Erica in that moment because I was like, oh, baby girl, like, we were trying to push something that maybe we both don't really believe in. I don't know.
I think it's the fact that this is And I think that we never saw, and also the craft had a lot to do with this too. I don't think we ever really saw more than like in horror pop culture, so much of Wicca was presented to the masses in a consumerist way, like in a capitalistic way. And I wonder if that was so bad. I don't think it was that bad. I think that it was kind of a coalescing of ideals, which is so many of us that were raised in the 80s and 90s were just, it was drilled into us. Save the planet, the ozone layer, recycle, turn off the light when you leave the bedroom, turn off the water when you're brushing your teeth. And so that kind of distilled into a naturalist kind of humanist concept that was co-opted by Wicca, which was co-opted into Wicca because of the fact that it was like you want religion because you want, or spirituality because that's such a strong part of human experience. And as an atheist, it's funny for me to say that, but I also can like scholastically understand that. I grew up Catholic, so I understand that. But I think that like it's an important part of human experience. I think that the desire to be a steward of the earth and connect with nature was very important to a lot of people in that time frame. And I also think that counterculture of like goth got shoehorned into it because in large fact to the craft, and that's fine. The Craft is a fucking great movie, which is why we haven't discussed it on this show. Yeah. But I think that there's nothing wrong with the concept of Wicca in the 90s and even now, I suppose. But like, it's just so funny because
you're talking about like consumer Wicca, right?
Well,
like
I feel like
Wicca.
That's all we saw. We're three white dudes that grew up in the 90s and 2000s, and so probably we only saw the consumerist Wicca, and like that Wicca for beginners books that were at like, every Quonset Hutter, like Borders and Head Shop and all that, and like our first smudge stick, and I love all those concepts. And what I really am trying to drill down into is that it felt so harmless in the late 90s, early 2000s when it was its own zeitgeist, and now that has become this modern bubble of new age thinking, which a lot of like Instagram moms have done and TikTok moms. And there's a really interesting pipeline. If you go on TikTok, you can listen all about it, and you can do readings about it, where there's this pipeline from new age beliefs like crystals and healing power, Reiki, yoga, all those whitewashed concepts of spirituality into the far right, like anti-vax and MAGA and like racism and bigotry. And it's crazy because it makes sense when you understand it in like the grand scope, but it's like the complete inversion of how genuinely sweet Wicca was, and like nature, like the power of nature and energy and auras and things like that. When this movie came out in 2000, 20 odd years later, it's weaponized so that your kids are dying of polio. Like, it's fucked up. I'm sorry.
It's really wild, and I'm going to use the word disenchantment without a pun, but it really is like but it's true because I think that I'm speculating here, but the rise in Wicca, particularly in that time, and particularly surrounding like environmentalism and connection to nature, was in retaliation to the generation prior that was excess and consumerism and a lot of this. But then
consumption,
consumption. But then at the same time, it's like, but then as that generation grows, as the goth teen and the Wicca teen grows into the mom and the anti-consumption mom, but it doesn't take into account the world changing, you kind of start the cycle over. And now we're going to have a counterculture that we already do within TikTok and other forms of social media and activism that way, that are then fighting against the thing. It's just it's generational cycles.
It's wild.
That Erica did not help anything out with being a witch.
No,
no, she didn't. I feel like she was the one that really made things a lot worse because she pissed off the Blair Witch.
She
She
pissed
did.
off the
She's
Blair
like,
Witch.
can I take this leaf? And the Blair Witch was like, fuck no, you're gonna die.
That's exactly it. And then, but then also she wasn't even the one who had, wasn't Teresa, right? Is that her name? No, the one who was pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah, Tristan.
Oh, the blonde.
Kristen. I
Yeah.
don't know why I said Teresa.
Tristan.
Mother Teresa.
With a T,
She's Mother
with
Teresa.
a T. Tristan.
Okay.
Tristan.
Tristan. Maybe that's what I got confused with. Like, yeah, it's just you expect it to be her the whole time. There's actually even a shot that she is at the foundation of the cabin, and they have a campfire, and they have like a tree or a post behind her, and she's standing posted up as if she's tied to the stake, and the campfire is at her feet. And it's not a great shot. It looks like they like really kind of half-assed it, but it's like they're really laying it on thick with her.
But you know what they were doing
and
with
then
that?
it falls apart.
That's
What?
actually genius. I take back everything I said. This movie's a masterpiece because what they were doing was they were showing that she's going to be burned at the stake as a witch when she's innocent. Guys, we cracked the code. This movie
cracked the code.
is
We
it
cracked
needs
the
to
Book
be
of
in the
Shadows.
Criterion. Criteria, guys. Let's do it.
I really truly believe this movie is going to get more love should it become available. Where did you guys
thanks
watch
to
it?
us. Dude,
Hulu.
I watched it on Hulu.
It's on Hulu,
Hulu?
now. They just
See,
dropped it like
this
a month
one next
ago.
week. Hulu.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, Hulu.
So
Well, thankfully
I really hope it finds an audience again because I love talking about this movie.
Yeah, but hopefully, thankfully, we never have to talk about anybody goth ever again on this podcast now that we've gotten it all out of our system.
What would you do if you had the ability to sync minds with your best friend? A partner? Maybe even a stranger? Would you share the deepest part of yourself with them?
I can already read your mind.
Then what am I thinking about right now?
You're thinking about how much you want people to support our Kickstarter for our first feature film, Sync.
You're so right. If we raise the money, we can make an amazing sci-fi thriller about mind syncing and toxic relationships.
Support women in film and check out our campaign now. Just go to Kickstarter.com and search Sync, that's SYNC, or click on the link in our bio on social media, and follow us at FemRegard and at Sync the Movie.
Fem.
Kyle, do you want to tell us what your double feature would be for this guy? Because I think that we've really gone way off the rails, and we need to just continue on with our day.
But I'm going to put us back on the derailed rails because I'm obviously going to choose my favorite, and I think what I doubled it up with last time. It's a little bit of a cop-out, but watching it again truly solidified that Hellraiser Hellworld is the only double feature that you can watch with Book of Shadows.
All right.
Truly.
Fair, whatever.
That would be, call me, bro. I will be at your house in
We'll
like
have a good
8
time.
hours.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll eat some Doritos and
Hell
just
yeah.
hell raise.
Just kick it.
Raise
All right,
hell.
Scott, you go next.
This is a weird one because I don't know if it would really work, but this is the first thing that came to mind because my actual double feature is next week's pick. But I'm gonna go with Sinister because you get the watching the
footage.
tapes
No,
back
that
thing.
totally makes sense.
That's great.
And I actually don't hate Sinister until the last 5 minutes when you see Bagul, because Bagul is a Slipknot character.
No kidding.
Nothing wrong with Slipknot, and nothing wrong with Sinister, but I'm not scared of Bagul.
No.
So
I ain't
anyway.
scared of no Bagul.
Oh, fuck!
Save that for when we actually do the episode.
Oh, shit.
Ghouler, I don't even know.
All right, so I'll tell you what my plan was.
Yeah.
My plan was to actually do this double feature and watch this movie, and it be my double feature as well as my what did I watch this week. Now, Kelly did a terrible job with his timing, so he literally just finished watching Blair Witch, Book of Shadows about 15 minutes before we came up here to record. But what I was going to say was, man, I would love to pair this up with a sequel to another beloved found footage movie that completely flips the script and does something different the second time around with our good friend Chris Lob Martinez out there Halloween mega tape.
Yes.
But that will probably just have to be a what did I watch this week in like a week or two. So instead, to go with a double feature that I'd actually seen, it's a classic around the horror movie night parts. But I thought of another movie about a group of 5 people going out into the woods and things getting a little weird and crazy.
Oh, no, Matt.
Of course, Sick, Serial Insane Clown Killer.
Yes! The only other option I would have accepted is Dude Bro Party Massacre 3.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, what did you watch this week, or what have you, that you want to talk about?
I watched In Cold Blood from 1967, based on Truman Capote's novel, and Robert Blake's in it. Scott Wilson's in it. Young Scott Wilson. Fucking.
I'm pretty sure I've seen this.
Incredible movie, beautifully shot. It's come out in 1967, so you're talking about filmmakers making really interesting choices, getting out of the way of like super consumer, like just whatever movies, you know what I mean? Like you just get, and it's black and white. It's fucking gorgeous. Carly had just finished reading the book, so she was like, I want to watch either In Cold Blood or Capote. I mean, which we're gonna watch both, but which one are we gonna watch first? And I don't know. We went In Cold Blood, no expectation. I knew it was like a good movie. Like I knew that it was, but fascinating, really beautiful. If you're into true crime, you're into, it's a part road movie in a lot of ways. It's fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to anybody who's into cinema.
Definitely nothing. Nobody listens to our show.
No kidding. Yeah, I know I come in Book of Shadows, but I really love Book of Shadows is on one shoulder, In Cold Blood's on the other.
But if you're a listener of like Camp Nightmare or Fright School or any of those shows, you might want to check out In Cold Blood. It's really
right.
We're
low Scott.
So I am strictly mentioning this because of the similarities in title, but What We Do in the Shadows season 4 is just a delight. I mean, by the time this drops, I'm assuming it'll be done. I don't know how many more episodes.
There's one more episode left.
Oh, okay. Well then, it'll be done. And I don't know if I love it more than last season, but it's, I mean, you just can't go wrong. It's always a good time.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So here's a fun fact about me. What I lack in enjoying watching sports, I more than make up in enjoying documentaries about things that happened in sports. And Netflix produces a pretty good series called Untold that are like these hour and 15-minute mini docs about like major sports controversies and like diving really deep into it. So every once in a while, if I just like need to throw on something in the background while I'm cooking, like they're a great option. So I threw on an episode of Untold randomly called Untold Operation Fraudulent Foul. And I was not prepared to find out that the entire story is about people from Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where I currently live. But basically, it's a really interesting story about a controversy that happened in about 2007, where one of the top referees in the NBA got caught in a giant mafia-based gambling scheme within the NBA. And it goes through this storyline of how the NBA was claiming that he was intentionally making bad basketball calls so that he would win with these gambles and the information that he was giving to the mob. But his side of the story is essentially like, look at my track record. I was ranked as like the second or third best referee in the entire NBA for how on point my calls were. All I did was use the insider information that I knew where the NBA would say, hey, the Bulls have Jordan and we're going to make more money if the playoff game goes 7 games instead of just a sweep. So he would pass that information on and say like, hey, the Bulls have won 3 already, so you might want to bet on the opposite team because the ref is probably going to do whatever they can to make it a 7-game series. And like he was just using the corruption of the actual NBA against itself in gambling.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting like breakdown of like how
He's a fucking whistleblower.
Yeah, like how their gambling scheme happened, how the NBA like completely threw him under the bus when he started explaining what happened to make it sound like he's making up a bunch of bullshit. He was just trying to make $1 million on the side by like throwing all of your favorite games. Like it's a really interesting 15-minute breakdown of it. And I'm just like scratching the surface. But
is it more? I don't know if you know the answer to this. Is it more Dark Side of the Ring or is it more 30 for 30 ESPN doc? Like what's
probably
the vibe?
30 for 30 based. I've never watched more than one episode of either, but it feels more 30 by 30 based of what I've seen.
Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, check it out. That was Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, as picked by Kyle, released in 2000. I did check and finally figure that out. Late 2000, but whatever.
Right on the money for old Kyle over here. For old TK.
We'll be back next week with another movie that, as Scott said, could have just been his double feature for this bad boy. So stay tuned for more Horror Movie Night.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.